بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد المصطفى وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجه.
قال سيدنا ومولانا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام: يا أبا ذر إنك غضبت لله فارجو من غضبت له. صدق إمامنا أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام. Before I begin with Sermon 129 or Sermon 130 in different versions, just a little bit of an introduction. Oftentimes when we want to define what success means, we take a look at how community, how society, or how other people define success. And by recognizing what other people think, we look to validate our own experiences. So if you take a sort of reflection on this for just a moment, if I want to understand what success means, I ask my parents, what does success mean? And naturally, as my parents, they're going to tell me what they think success means for me, because they migrated from a distant land to come to this country for economic and educational opportunity for their children. And if I take a look and I ask my friend, and I tell him, what does success mean to you? He's going to give his thoughts and his reflection in terms of what success means to him. And then if you take it at an even more broader perspective of a level, you take a look at community. How does community generally define what success means, for instance? If you're driving your car on the streets of Washington, D.C., and you're driving through the city, and as we know that city has a wide variety of people who come from very different economic backgrounds. And if you see the number of homeless people in a city like Washington, D.C., people in New York City, where I live, the first thought that comes to your mind when you see people who are going through economic struggle is they weren't really successful in this world. And on the flip side, if you go to other areas of Washington, D.C., and you see like these really fancy luxury apartments, that probably cost like $10,000 for like a one-bedroom, right? Like it is in New York City as well. The first thought that's going to come to your mind with those sitting and driving with you is people who live in that building, they probably are really, really successful. Because again, success is often driven by what other people determine. Now, what if I were to give you an example of a man who was the leader of his country, and he had everyone submit to whatever it is that he had to say. He had all of the wealth in the world, he had all of the power, he had all authority. Without explaining any more than that, you'd think that like, wow, this like guy like got a lot of places. Then if I tell you that that guy's name is Pharaoh, for instance, right? You'd be like, oh. But he used to take his power and he used to abuse others, and he used to be a tyrant, and he used to not be ethical, not be moral. Or if I were to tell you that there was once this guy, he tried to gather together some support for a, political revolution that he desired to stand for, but, he only found support of about, I don't know, between 70 and 100 people, and opposing him were 30,000. You'd think, wow, like, that guy's not really successful. Then if I tell you his name was Hussein, the son of Ali, the son of Abu Dharr, you'd be like, oh yeah, of course he was really successful. Where is success and where is Hussein? Where is success and where is Musa? So what I'm trying to say is that our sort of understanding of how life works is often created by those around us. And when you take a look at these words of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in the advices that he gives to Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, his really, really close confidant, and a close confidant of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He reminds us, as he does so often, that success is not to be determined by what people think. It's about standing up for that which is right. So when you go to look at the words of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he begins by stating, Ya Abu Dharr, innaka ghadibta lillah farju man ghadibta lah. O Abu Dharr, you showed anger in the name of Allah, so you should have hope in Him. And I know that many of you guys might have read it and have a little bit of an understanding of the historical background, but just a couple of sort of insights. Abu Dharr al-Ghafari was, like I said, really close to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and is one of those few companions of the Commander of the Faithful who stood with him staunchly after the passing of the Prophet alayhi salam. And he had one particular role and niche in that early community in those first 15 to 20 years after the passing of the Prophet, and that was to be incredibly vocal to the authorities of his time, demanding the right of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And he did so on many different occasions. And he was, again, very staunch and very aggressive, and everyone has to play different roles in institutional building. I'm going to take this and just open up one quick tangent for a second. Where we are as a community in America, everyone has to play different roles. We need a lot of mosques, but then we need people to get involved in universities, and then we need people to build homeless shelters and orphanages, and people need to get educated in the religious sciences, but then people also need to know how to run communities. The more that we build, the more successful that we're going to be, as long as we don't break each other down. Imam Ali alayhi salam has a strategic role to play because he's the Imam and he's the divine and infallible appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when many people, they fail to understand why he wasn't necessarily so vocal, and they say, are we sure that Ali was with the right if he wasn't so vocal about his right? Then you see evidence by other people, those who are around him, who are able to build institutions, not necessarily physical institutions, but build certain methodologies within their community. Similarly, you see post-Karbala, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, he has a certain role to play because he is the Imam of the time. But you see that the manifestations of knowledge that he gives toward people, like Mukhtar, though it might not have been so direct, like to his son Zayd ibn Ali, their responsibilities were to stand and rise and do what they can in order to, garner people's support. But Imam Zayn al-Abidin couldn't do that because he has another role to play. So Abu Dharr al-Ghafari was incredibly staunch in his opposition toward the authorities, and particularly the third caliph, which got him into a lot of trouble. And he was speaking about the lack of economic equality within the Muslim community to the extent where it got him exiled from the city of Medina, and he was sent toward these outskirts where he lived a really, really difficult life. And there are many hadiths that speak to the incredible spiritual abstinence of Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, rahmatullah alayh, radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, and you can go ahead and take a look at that, in books of history and so on. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight so you're able to understand what Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying, because I'd rather speak to what the Imam is saying to Abu Dharr and how it is more practical for all of us as opposed to the historical context. So Abu Dharr, like I said, he stands in opposition toward a lot of the policies of the authorities during that time, which got him exiled, where he eventually died outside of the city of Medina, away from family, in really intense poverty. And the authorities, they advised that no one should go and visit Abu Dharr, no one should see him off, and if anyone does, they could also potentially be reprimanded by the government. But nonetheless, Imam Ali and Hassan and Hussein and some of the other family, they all went to go and see Abu Dharr off in his last days as he was leaving. So again, he states, "O Abu Dharr, you showed anger in the name of Allah, so have hope in him. Ya Abu Dharr, innaka ghadibta lillah, farju man ghadibta lah." When someone makes a stand that potentially isolates or marginalizes him or her, oftentimes they come and they take a look at, no one else did it, so was I really right in doing what I did? Let me give you an example. Again, like super contemporary. For those of you who are like following like what's happening on like in the media in regards to like the NFL right now. Colin Kaepernick, as we know, like a year and a half ago, he started making a protest in the midst of national anthems before games, which eventually got him completely removed from the game. Many people, they wondered and they said, wouldn't it be more impactful for him to play the game and continue to be vocal instead of openly protesting the national anthem? But he stood by what he believed in, and obviously it's going to yield that much more benefit, not only for him probably financially, with like new commercial deals and so on and so forth, but the conversation is still going and it's been more than a year now, right? And isn't that what he wanted at the end of the day? And like I'm a pretty like big sports fan, so if you turn on like ESPN or if you follow like social media, you always are hearing people talk and debate over the last year. Every single Sunday, more people talk about this than the actual games. Because it's not only a matter that's relative to football, but rather it's a matter that's really important toward socio-political affairs in the United States. And I think everyone should really be aware of what we're living in terms of this climate. That it would dominate the headlines to the extent where people would debate whether what he did was right or whether what he did was wrong. But clearly he stood by his values, while a couple of other players, they stood by it for a little while, then they retracted, then they did it again, and they retracted, and so on and so forth. And perhaps, I don't know, but he might have been speculating amongst himself whether this was the right thing for him to do. Because he used to get paid a lot of millions of dollars to go and play football, and now he's out of the job. And I'm not comparing the situation, but I'm just trying to put it in a frame that sometimes when we do something that no one else does, because standing up for the truth is really, really hard, that we might wonder, but no one else did it. Do I really need to do it? If someone is getting abused on the streets, at your workplace, I don't know, like on a train or in a public place, no one else is going to stand up. We know that that's the majority of people. I work a lot in New York City in regards to young people who have challenges with Islamophobia, for instance. And many people, when they encounter Islamophobia, it happens to be in a public place, where like young women, they have like their hijabs torn off their head. Or there is someone who's seemingly visibly Muslim, meaning with brown skin, like a beard if he's a male, for instance, because of the way that we racialize Islam, and that has its own issues and problems in and of itself. But nonetheless, the media demonstrates what a Muslim looks like. So people often jump on what Muslims look like, and they even attack like Sikhs, people from the Sikh community, and so on and so forth. Anyhow, I say all of this because oftentimes people who are victims of Islamophobia, it happens at like coffee shops, it happens at restaurants, it happens during public transportation. And like I've also been a victim of it, when someone has said something, and you could be in a packed subway car in New York City, and someone is literally like ripping into you verbally and saying really, really awful things. You know what the worst feeling is? Not what that guy is saying to you, but the fact that no one in that train car or no one in that space is going to stand up and defend you. Because we're not the community who's going to stand up for what is right. But we're the followers of Ahlul Bayt. So if we're not going to do it, then like, what are we learning? What are we gaining? Imam Ali alayhi salam, he states, Ya Abu Dharr, innaka ghadibta lillah, farju man ghadibta lah. Oh, Abu Dharr, you got angry for Allah. So don't worry about anything else. If you get angry for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you stand up for what is right because that's what God expects from you, then don't worry about what potentially might happen later, because standing up for what is right is right. And standing up for justice is justice, because we are the followers of the leader of justice, and that is Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam. Inna al-qawma khafuna ala dunyahum. He said, people in community, I know how the translation is, but I'm going to translate it a little differently, that people generally are afraid for this world, for their world, meaning for their monetary, materialistic, dunyawi sort of life. That's why no one else wanted to make this stand. Another way that it can be read is that he's speaking directly about the authorities who continue to isolate and marginalize people's economic opportunities because they only care about keeping themselves in power, which is, again, like super relevant to the world that we live in. وَخِفْتَهُمْ عَلَى دِينِكَ. And you were scared for them, you were fearful for them, for their faith. All you wanted was to create a better community. All you wanted to do was create a better society for them, so that they're able to spiritually develop as well. Then leave to them that for which they are afraid of you, and get away from them taking away what you fear them about. In other words, the Imam alayhi salam is saying that at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to perform, for instance, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, to bring people toward goodness and to repel them from committing any act of, misguidance, vice, or whatever it might be. But we have within our books of law and jurisprudence, for instance, like the Risala of Sistani would say the same, that it's only your responsibility to bring people, to enjoin people to good and to forbid them from evil, to perform Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, if you know that they're going to listen to what you have to say. You should not go and tell someone what they're doing is wrong if they're never going to listen to you. Because there's no point of doing that. In fact, you might just, continue to allow for them to be really, really isolated. There has to be a way, there has to be a method and a style by which we speak to people. You can't always, consistently go after people when they're doing something wrong. So sometimes you need to make sure that in that process, you're protecting your faith also, so you're not also seeing yourself, and I'm giving again, because we're not Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we need to be people who protect our faith and not always be in the state of, what do you call it, being very, very preachy to others. Protect your own spiritual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if you're always going after other people, you might begin to also take a look at them from a very arrogant, prideful perspective. In the story of Luqman, in chapter 31 of the whole Quran, and I'll pull it up right now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes a conversation between Luqman and his son. And he states, Ya bunayya, in verse number 16 of chapter 31, Ya bunayya innaha in taku mithqala habbatin min khardalin fatakun fi sakhratin aw fi samawati aw fi al-ardi ya'ti biha Allah inna Allah latifun khabir. The son of Luqman was a non-believer, as our traditions tell us. And by the way, Luqman, as our traditions demonstrate also to us, was not a prophet, but rather he was a wali from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyhow, his son was someone who did not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Luqman obviously is a man of really high morality, a man of really great God consciousness, and naturally anyone who's a believer would not want to see their children's, their children, God forbid, be non-believers. Which is why we're always taught, for instance, to make dua for them, so on and so forth, and to do the best that we can. So imagine how Luqman feels in light of the situation that he sort of encountered with. That his son is a non-believer. He himself is a man of really high faith. How is he going to bring him into sort of the confines of belief? He could tell him, look, my son, get out of my house. Look, you don't believe in what I believe. This is a problem. You're not my son. He could do something like that. He could reprimand him by other sorts of language. He could do a lot of different things, but he doesn't do any of those. It's a really powerful sort of conversation that he has with his son in this verse. He states, Ya bunayya. Ya bunay in Arabic language doesn't only mean, oh my son, right? It means like, oh my beloved son, oh my sweetheart, oh my dear, whatever. In a really terms of endearment and affection. Ya bunayya innaha in taku mithqala habbatin min khardal. So he begins with terms of endearment to his son, who is not a believer. And our tradition tells us his son is not like a little kid either, he's an adult. إنها إن تكن مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض. He said, oh my son, imagine if there was a mustard seed. Mustard seed is, in classical Arabic language, the smallest sort of demonstration of something that you want to explain to something. You call it a mustard seed. Because a mustard seed is like really, really tiny, like almost microscopic. I didn't even know that mustards have seeds, actually, until I remember like reading this verse of the Quran like some years ago, and I looked it up on Wikipedia or something. So he says, إِنَّهَا إِن تَكُن مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِّنْ خَرْدَلٍ. That, oh, Luqman, excuse me, oh my dear son, imagine there was a mustard seed. So imagine there's something really, really tiny, and this really, really tiny thing is in a sakhra. It's in a large boulder that's the size of half of this room. Now imagine that massive rock, it might be in the heavens, and it might be in the earth. Now imagine if it was just in this room, how difficult it would be to find it, because we have to break up the rock, so on and so forth. It would take forever, right? You're not going to be able to just see it. Now imagine it might be somewhere in the heavens, or somewhere in the earth. How are you going to find it? And of course the son is like, okay, Dad, like, what are you trying to say? And then he responds and he says, يَأْتِ بَهَا اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'll know where it is. Inna Allah latifun khabir. Allah is really gentle and he's really precise. And then he says, okay, that's it. That's my advice to you. After that, then he says, oh my son, you should pray, you should be good to your parents. Don't be arrogant, so on and so forth. He doesn't go right away and says, you have to pray, man. If you don't pray, get out of my house. And that's really hard to do and to think and to use the wisdom of Luqman. But first he wants to get his son to think a little bit. You might not believe in God, but know that the God that I believe in, he has knowledge over everything, including that which is in your heart. But he doesn't tell him that directly. He wants to get his mind to work a little bit. So I say this example in order to go back toward the words of the commander of the faithful, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, that, oh Abu Dharr, like, you made your best effort. And you spoke truth to power. And that's not easy. But still, they were not receptive to what you had to say. Don't worry, you did your job. Luqman's son eventually became a believer. Those who Abu Dharr was trying to bring toward morality and toward walaya and toward recognition of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and toward, justice within the community, they weren't receptive. But you did what you had to do, so know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like watching over you. When Nuh alayhi salam, he preaches to his community, he preached for 950 years. The hadith say he got 8 followers. Another hadith says 80, another one says 800. And maybe there's a lot of traditions as well. So even if it's 800 followers in 950 years, that means 1 follower a year, less than that. So when we don't have people piling into the mosques on certain days, on certain programs, don't be upset. Because we're making an effort to build what you can and to get people to subscribe, but people are going to be people. And it's our job to do what we can toward making a difference in our community, in our people, within our own selves. But at the same time, remember to be God conscious during the process. Because Allah, you did it for Allah, so Allah will take care of you. Don't worry about it. Then he continues by stating, how needy are they for what you dissuade them from, and how heedless are you towards that, towards what they are denying you. Meaning what? That they really need faith. They really need the advice that you're giving them. And what did they take away from you? They took away things from this world. They took away, your need for community. They took away they took away your wealth and they put you in poverty. And Abu Dharr, again, Abu Dharr was someone who, as also like the footnote, if I'm not mistaken, also mentioned, according to a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that Abu Dharr is the Isa of my ummah, right? Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus alayhi salam, he's particularly known for the fact that he completely repelled this world, this dunya. His focus was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we learned from Ahlul Bayt, they would eat little, they would sleep little, they would not be so concerned about Allah. And though we might be consumed by those sorts of things, we take small incremental steps toward getting to what we, where we really need to be. It's not a problem to go and seek wealth, but when it consumes your life, that's when it becomes a problem. And we need to seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We recited Dua al-Hamza, Ilahi, أخرج حب الدنيا من قلبي. Oh Allah, remove the love of this heart, remove the love of this world from my heart. And Abu Dharr had manifested that in its entirety. So Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying that what they took away from you, you don't care about it anyway. You care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you'll be able to deal with that. And then he states, you will shortly know who is the gainer tomorrow on the day of judgment and who is more enviable. Even if these skies and earth were closed to some individual and he feared Allah, then Allah would open them from him. And he continues on, and I'll just conclude with this last point. That Imam Ali alayhi salam, he knows already what's in the heart of Abu Dharr. But I think that when I was sort of overlooking this over the last couple of days and thinking about what I should talk about, I wanted to make sure that we don't leave without me mentioning this point. Abu Dharr al-Ghafari knew what he was getting himself into. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously rewards him. And Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is obviously proud of him in this moment. But what's so beautiful is the gesture that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen offers to Abu Dharr by consoling him with words. To continue to encourage him in spite of the challenge and the difficulty that he is sort of undergoing in that moment. He still has nice words to say to him. Don't worry, Abu Dharr, you're going to be okay. Allah will take care of you. He didn't have to say that. He could have said, you're going to live a really tough life. I'm going to make dua for you. But he didn't do that. And rather, he tells them that tomorrow, you're going to get everything. You're going to be victorious on the day of judgment. Well, those guys who did what they did to you, they're going to be in trouble. We need to be a people who are encouraging to others when they're doing the right thing. When they're doing anything small or large, whether they're young or be they old, we need to be encouraging to our spouses and to our children, to bring confidence into people's hearts. And again, I say this because I work with a lot of kids, college students, 18, 19, 20-year-old Muslim kids. And amongst the biggest problems that they have is in regards to their self-confidence because of the cultures that we grow up in. So we always demand perfection from our kids. Let kids be kids, then also tell your kids that you care about them. And tell your spouses that you love them. And say nice things to people, because that's what we learn from Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi tayyibin at-tahirin.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.